can feel the introversion leaving my body because today is the day that I have to film videos. Do you have an idea for a book, but that's all it is, an idea, where you know what the premise is and you kind of have some ideas for scenes that you want to have happen, but you don't even know where to begin when you think about starting to write that book because you don't know what to write? Today I'm going to talk to you about brainstorming, specifically how I take an idea for a premise of a novel and brainstorm scenes and plot points and the shape that I want that book to have. This video is not about brainstorming different story ideas for different premises. This is about brainstorming scenes and plot points to flesh out a premise that you already have. So to watch this video, all you need is a story premise, and a story premise is a one-sentence description of a story like, I want to write a book about aliens coming down to Earth and planting a bunch of trees, and those trees make everyone kind of high, and everyone on Earth suddenly gets this weird alien high, and like what happens? So I'm going to start with a disclaimer, and then I'm going to share my method with you and walk you through exactly how I flesh out my own story ideas. Then I'm going to give you some tips for how to unlock your creativity and not let perfectionism shut down the ideas that you come up with. So in order to brainstorm anything at all, you need to turn off your perfectionist brain. I don't know if anyone watching is a perfectionist like me, but I have this overwhelming feeling that bleeds into everything I do, that if I'm not 100% perfect at it, it's not worth doing at all. This is something that really gets in the way of me experiencing joy and learning new things. So I've made a very conscious effort to stop that and overcome that in myself, and learn how to turn it off and give myself the permission to be imperfect at things, to try things, to learn things. Perfectionism is the enemy of creativity. Your brain can come up with a really fun idea and then immediately shut it down because it's not perfect. I'm going to tell you right now, perfection does not exist. The purpose of writing is to create stories that give you pleasure, not to create stories that are perfect. If you're chasing perfection, you will be chasing it forever and you will not create anything. Perfectionism will kill your desire to create, and so you have to get rid of that part of your brain, or at least tell it to shut up momentarily when you're brainstorming. You can't create anything new if you're trying to create under pressure. So put that in a box and let that go. And don't approach this method with the intention that every idea that you come up with has to be the idea that ends up in the book. There is no pressure at all on any of this. Your goal for brainstorming is to come up with a version of this idea that you like, that you would enjoy enough to actually start pursuing. It's not the final version, it is going to change, but if there's any pressure on it, it's not going to happen. So get rid of that. Once your perfectionism is in a box, the method I like to use for brainstorming my books, I think of as an upside down triangle. I go big picture down to little picture. So I start at the top of the triangle where you have the widest layer of the triangle. I don't know why I think of the triangle as being upside down. This actually probably works as well if it's right side up, but it's my YouTube channel and it's an upside down triangle. All of the things at the top of the triangle are your big picture story nuggets. So your main characters, your conflicts, your big plot points, and then as you get down to the point of the triangle, you get down to the individual scenes. When I have a story premise, I think from big to small, almost like I'm skydiving and my story is somewhere on the ground and I'm looking at it from the airplane, and then as I'm diving towards it, it becomes more clear as I get closer to it. But I have to start way up there in order for me to understand what I'm working with down there. I like to use zany example stories on this channel just for fun and because it makes filming more fun. So do we want to just run with the alien thing? Let's say your premise is that aliens come down to Earth and plant all of these trees, and these trees leach something into the air and then make all of the humans really high. Maybe I came up with it in a dream or when I was walking around my college campus and watching everyone experience something similar when they were at the Spring Fling concert. But this is my nugget of an idea and I'm very passionate about it. The biggest thing that I would need to figure out first is what my conflict is. All stories are based in conflict, and you don't have a story if you don't have a compelling conflict. So let's say your main character lives in a very boring, normal neighborhood, and everyone around her starts getting alien tree high, and she's the only person who doesn't experience that. And all of her family members are like completely losing their minds, and her soon-to-be husband is like gone completely like nutty, and so have all of her neighbors, and everyone is like completely wigging out. And so she decides, but she's not affected. And so she decides that she needs to figure out how to cure her soon-to-be husband and everyone who lives in their neighborhood. That is a conflict. You have a character who wants something, which is your main character who wants to cure her soon-to-be husband and the people in her neighborhood, and you have the aliens that want to infect the humans because that will make them more easy to govern. I then move on to the slightly more specific step, which is me figuring out my beginning, middle, and end. These can be very vague, and you don't have to have a very clear idea of what's going to happen in the story to come up with these. I am coming up with this example on the spot. I have absolutely no idea how this book is going to play out. But in the beginning, it makes sense to have the aliens come down to Earth and infect everyone with this disease. At the end, it would make sense for her to find a way to stop and cure everybody and overcome the aliens, unless it's like some sort of deep tragedy. But I write very commercial fiction that is written for the enjoyment of my readers, and so I always have that in mind and don't want to, I don't write tragedies. I have nasty things happen in my books, but there is always a happy ending because I don't want to make my readers want to kill themselves after they read my books. And then in the middle, you have to have things that connect these two things. So she would go and talk to the aliens and try to figure out what the aliens are doing, and then she'd have some sort of conflict with the aliens. Maybe she'd go up into the spaceship, and then eventually she'll defeat them. That's like your very basic structure for this story. So once I have that, I get a little more specific. The next step that I take is I draw everything out on a story arc. A story arc is an arc that looks kind of like this. It graphs time on the horizontal axis and then tension/conflict on the vertical axis. As the story goes on, the tension or conflict gets higher until it comes to a head, and then it resolves. So I'll put my ideas on this story arc. So down here, where the tension's not that high yet, is where you have the aliens coming down and infecting everybody. And then over here, as the tension is getting higher, there are more and more adverse effects that are happening from this tree, and all of these people are losing their minds, and maybe they're turning on each other. Maybe this is some sort of actual like weird psychological horror where they're starting to murder each other, and the aliens, it's like some sort of social experiment, and the aliens are trying to get the humans to destroy each other so the aliens don't have to do anything. The tension is getting higher as these worse and worse things start happening, and then it gets even higher when the main character goes to try to confront the aliens. And then at the climax, the main character actually has to go like defeat the aliens in a giant battle, or she's able to get all of the people in the neighborhood to turn on the aliens and remember who their real enemy is. And then there's a resolution. So by following this tension line, you can kind of logically start to piece together the kinds of things that would need to be happening in your story in order for that conflict to follow that story arc. So then I start writing these things down. I have a big whiteboard where I draw out the story arc, and then I will have all of the different, like I'll have markers and I can write down over here, you like have, this is what happens at the beginning, and this is what happens in the middle, and like over here, like here's an idea for this thing. And so there are a couple of words on the whiteboard at this point, but nothing crazy. After I have this figured out, I narrow the focus a little bit more and I figure out my 5 main plot points. I have made a video on this separately on the channel, which I'm going to link in the description of this video, that breaks each of these plot points down in detail. But I have 5 major plot points that I like to figure out when I'm first figuring out a story idea. These are the ones that work the best for me because it's simple enough that it is not overwhelming, and I can answer it knowing fairly little about the different characters and things going on. The first one is my point of entry, which is the very first point in my book. The second is the inciting incident, and that is the point where the conflict happens. It's like your call to adventure, the thing that starts your story. The third is the midpoint, which is the big plot twist in the middle of the story that changes the stakes in some way. The fourth is the climax, which is where the conflict comes to a head. And the fifth is the resolution, which is basically just how your story ends. I don't need to know a ton about who my characters are or anything like that in order to fill these out, which is why I do this before doing any kind of hero's journey. For our alien idea, a general rule of thumb for the point of entry is to establish the things that the characters are going to lose or that are at stake in the inciting incident. So in this case, if the main character's husband-to-be is about to get infected and all these people in the neighborhood and like are about to be infected and everyone's going to start killing each other and it's going to be like the purge, then it's going to be happy, happy neighborhood time in the point of entry. She is planning her wedding. She is all excited. Her neighbors are waving to her. She's a part of this community. Then in the inciting incident, the aliens are going to come and they're going to infect everyone and start planting all of these trees. I'm not figuring out any of the logistics yet. We are just sketching the idea together. In the midpoint, it can shift from maybe everyone at the beginning of the book, because it has to be, the midpoint is some sort of dramatic shift. The first half of the book can be everyone together is feeling really great and like, you know, they're feeling this like high from the trees but they're actually like energized and excited to do stuff and they're like, it doesn't seem that ominous. And then in the midpoint, it's a shift into being actually like a psychological horror or something like that when they all start to want to try and kill each other or everything gets really violent. That will fundamentally change the book. And then in the climax, all of the people rise up and defeat the aliens and redirect their attention, or maybe there's a cure, or there's some other thing that the main character finds out. Let's say, for the purpose of this video, the main character finds a cure, she's able to give everyone the cure, and they can defeat the aliens and get rid of the trees. The resolution: your main character gets married, the neighborhood is happy, and everyone lives happily ever after. As you can see, I'm not getting into specifics yet. I am sketching out a general structure so I can see the big picture. Once I have that and I'm happy with that, I narrow my field of focus a little bit more. I like to use the hero's journey when plotting out my books. The hero's journey is my favorite story structure, but there are many of them. You can use the 3-act structure, the 5-act structure, save the cat. I like the hero's journey because I write very character-driven books. Characters are my favorite part of writing a book, and I like that the hero's journey is focused around the internal growth of your main character. However, you can use whichever one you like and whichever one speaks most to you. This is where my story starts to actually take some shape. I'm not going to go through in detail and create a hero's journey plot point for every single point in this hypothetical example because it would take too long, and I don't think you want to sit around and listen to me do that. But I have other videos on this channel where I have done that for other story ideas, so I'll link those in the description of this video. Once I have a hero's journey, my idea is going to start taking shape because the hero's journey is going to force me to start figuring out who my main character is, what my main character wants, what their backstory is, how they're going to change. It's going to force me to figure out who the mentor is, or the mentor figure, who the allies and enemies could be. I'm going to have to start giving this world some texture, and that is where I'm really going to have to start doing some brainstorming. I have one more step in my process, then I will transition to my tips for brainstorming. So once I have all of these steps of the hero's journey written out on my whiteboard, because I like to plan everything out on a whiteboard, just because in my perfectionist brain, it feels less permanent and more forgiving, and so if I come up with something silly, no one has to see it, I can just wipe it away and it never existed. Once I have that, I move on to brainstorming all of the different scenes that could happen in this book. I have a little stack of sticky notes and I will sit there and think of every single possible thing that could happen. Not that should happen, not that needs to happen, everything that could happen and that I want to have happen. And then I physically stick them on my whiteboard so I can see all of it out there on the story grid. And once all of that, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect in order, but it's just roughly stuck in the general place where it would be. And once I have that, I will type all of it up, I will put it in the computer, and then I will go about arranging it in a plot grid. I love plot grids. I've made a lot of videos on this channel about plot grids, so if you want to learn more about how I do that, go check out those videos. And that is an overview of my entire outlining process. It is super fun. It is very energizing. It can be very overwhelming if you don't have your perfectionism in check. But lucky for both of us, you obviously do. And so now I'm going to move on to telling you some tips that I have found personally helpful when brainstorming, just to start letting my brain spit out ideas. No idea is too stupid to end up on that Post-it note. Put every single idea that you have on one of those Post-it notes. Do not try to edit ideas in your head. Even if that idea could not possibly happen, put it on the Post-it note. Even if that idea does not belong in this story, put it on the Post-it note. Even if you think that that is too corny, put it on the Post-it note. If you do not edit in your head as you're going, your brain is not going to start censoring itself, and you are just going to be able to get the volume of ideas needed in order to get some good ones. A very small percentage of the ideas that you come up with in your initial brainstorm will end up in the final version of your book. But in order to get to the good ones, you have to put all of the bad ones on the page. I don't know about you, but I have always loved to write. Ever since I was a little kid, I've loved to tell stories. And so by letting my inner child guide this process, not only do I have more fun with it because I can just put my most outlandish ideas, the ones that would belong in the notebooks that I would write when I was writing stories as a kid, but I also can get my most creative ideas this way because I'm not asking myself what the ideas should be or what I should be writing. It's really asking myself what I want to have happen in this story and what would be crazy if it did happen. And that's where I really get the good ones. Because little kids are not censoring themselves. They're not thinking about what they should write. They're thinking about what's cool and what makes them feel something. And even as adults, that is why a lot of people read, is to feel something. And it is your job as a writer to give them that feeling. My second tip: go out and move your body. There is a reason that the Romantic poets would write poetry while they were walking through the woods. I get some of my best ideas when I am walking around, when I am moving my body, when I am driving in the car even. Not sitting while you do this can help open your brain up. I don't really understand the psychology of it. I'm not a psychologist, but I do know that it works, so go try it. There's a rhythm to brainstorming. When you are writing furiously on the Post-its and you don't give your brain a second to think, your subconscious is spitting out possibilities, that is when you're really going to get the good stuff that starts coming out in the brainstorm. If you are pausing for a really long time in between each idea, if you're overthinking it, if you're overthinking how it should be worded on the Post-it, this is all interrupting your flow. You've probably heard that writers can get into a flow, and then that's how the books can, you can just get into a flow and then all of a sudden you have thousands of words if you're just completely locked into that flow. It's the same with brainstorming. Try not to interrupt it. Try not to get up and get a glass of water halfway through. Set a timer. Say, I'm going to brainstorm for 20 minutes and then just write furiously and write down as many ideas as you can to not give your brain a second to think. In today's day and age, it's really hard because all of us have really bad attention spans because we're on things like TikTok that make us hikey kind of just stupid. And so we need to work a little harder to maintain our focus. And finally, this is an honorable mention, is refer back to your id list. If you don't know what an id list is, and if you don't have one, I highly recommend you go start one. I learned about id lists from a podcast done by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, all about writing to your id and your inner pleasure center. She's a psychologist. She's a New York Times bestselling author. The podcast is great. I don't actually know if you can still access it, but I made a video summing up kind of the things that she said in it, which I will also link in the description of this one. Gosh, I'm just linking videos nonstop today. But she encouraged everyone to keep a list of the things that they consume in books and media that just appeal to them for some reason. They might not understand why, but it affects them emotionally in some way. So sometimes when you have your id list open when you're brainstorming and you feel yourself start to hit a wall, you can start pulling things off of your id list, and that might spark another idea that is connected to that, and then you can pull yourself out of it and keep brainstorming. You want to pack as many things as you like in the books that you create, because otherwise, why do you do it? Writing wouldn't be fun. I write my books first and foremost for me and for the kind of reader that I am. And I know that if I'm kicking my feet and giggling at something that is happening in my books, that chances are other people are too. Plus, I spend more time with this book than any other human being on the planet. I will spend months, if not years, on a project, and people can read it all in one day and then just think about it. So I want to make sure that the time I spend with it is time that I'm really, really enjoying. So that was how I like to brainstorm my book ideas. I hope that this video was helpful to you. If you have a second, I would be super grateful if you could like this video and also subscribe to my channel. My name is Claire Fraze, and I'm an award-winning author who makes videos sharing actionable writing tips that helped me make my own writing better. I'm the author of the 5-book paranormal thriller They Stay series, which is displayed behind me, and my book They Stay won the grand prize at the 2023 Writer's Digest Self-Published Book Awards, which I'm very proud of. Are there things that help you brainstorm that I didn't include in this video? Please comment down below and share them with me. I love hearing what works for you, and it's really my intention with this channel to bring together a community of writers who can help each other, who can ask questions, who can answer each other's questions and support each other when they have a question about writing. I do my best to answer as many comments as I can, but I highly encourage you to comment down below, share your thoughts, and reply to each other and engage in a dialogue in the comments. I hope you have a fantastic week, everybody, and as always, happy writing.